Thanks for checking out another sermon from the Internet's Church of Metal, Rockin' Metal Revival. You can download the entire show at rmrshow.com or check out this highlight from the latest RMR.
From the CD Somewhere on the Other Side of Nowhere, brand new music from Powerman 5000, Andy. That's Supervillain. It's good to have him back. I remember when I first heard Worlds Collide on the radio, I was like, thank God somebody came back and kicked our ass.
Good shit.
It is good stuff. And on the phone with us is the founding and the only original member left in the band, if I'm not mistaken, Spider. How you doing, Spider?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is great to have you on, and it's great to have new music back from Powerman 5000. You guys have been working on this album for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Every year we, actually, I should say, whenever we finish an album, we always have this great scheme of like getting right back in and putting out a record, within the year, and it always ends up being 3 years. I don't know what our problem is, but we just can't seem to get it together where we put a record out in any kind of timely manner at all. But yeah, I mean, it's been a long time coming, and it's this album in particular I'm really excited about because it is. You mentioned When Worlds Collide, and this album is really sort of a return to that vibe, and that, I call it a return to form. It's like sort of going back and reclaiming, I guess, the sound that we're most well known for.
And you right now are currently out on tour, right? You just kicked that off?
Yeah, I just started that, and this is the first run of shows for the new album, so it's pretty exciting to get out there and play some of these new tunes that we've never played live before.
Have you had a chance to do any smaller gigs yet to debut any of this material, or are you waiting for the tour?
Well, we did a warm-up gig in L.A. At the Whiskey, the world-famous Whiskey A Go-Go, and played some new stuff. And it's amazing. A lot of times you'll find when you play your new songs, that's the cue for people to go get a beer or maybe hit the restroom. But for whatever reason, these new songs are just going off amazing in the live setting, and in some instances, getting a bigger reaction than some of the old stuff. So all signs are good.
Now, you had mentioned it usually takes you 3 years in between recordings. Have you been sitting on this one that long, or, I mean, how long has it actually been finished? Has it just been a problem with the releasing of it?
Well, it was just a long process to make the record. I got some newer band members. I mean, they've been in the band for a while, but this is the first time we actually tried to sit down and write music together. There was a little bit of a learning curve there, figuring out what I want, me figuring out what they can do, and
Sure.
So that slowed us down. And also, we've been playing shows. We don't really tour like we used to. We kind of tour all the time now, so we're always doing shows. So we would, get home, work on the record, go do a week of shows, come back home, work on the record. So it slowed the process down, but it was also a kind of a blessing because it gave us a minute to really live with the material and self-edit as we went along and
right.
Really kind of put a record together with some focus.
Now, the band, the way you have it now, is it a pretty solid lineup in your opinion? I noticed you've had a lot of members over the years, so...
I always think it's a solid lineup until somebody, leaves or gets fired. But, I'll tell you this. After all these years of doing this, I can honestly say that this particular lineup is the tightest live band I've ever had, and also just the most fun. Like, these guys get it. They understand it. In fact, these new guys were sort of instrumental in sort of pushing me a little bit to get back to the old style Powerman stuff, which was cool. I mean, they grew up as fans of the band, and so now they're in the band and they see it with a different clarity sometimes than I do. So, I feel really good about this particular lineup.
I don't think a lot of people realize, Spider, that Powerman was originally formed back in '91, right? You guys you've been doing this for 18 years in Powerman 5000?
It's unbelievable to think like that. Just when you say that, I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe I've been doing this. I would have never imagined, because, I started this band in Boston, having no idea, what was going to... It was just basically get together with some friends and start playing music and goofing around, and then that led to some notoriety in Boston, and then that led to some record deal offers, and then that, and it just kept going, and then... it's funny. Whenever I talk about being in a band, I always reference that movie. I reference the third Godfather movie. There's a great scene with Al Pacino talking about trying to get out of the Mafia, and he says, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. And that's exactly how I feel about being in a band. It's just no matter what your realistic side of your brain tells you, you just keep doing it. It's because it's just when it's good, it's great. It's just the best gig in the world.
So now going back, I didn't know this myself. I guess the other two guys probably did, but Rob Zombie is your brother, correct?
Yeah, he is my brother. It's funny, and I thought everybody in the world knew that by now, but I still get
everybody except for me, apparently.
Hey. Well, you're one step. At least you said you didn't know. I did an interview once in for some local newspaper, and the woman asked me if Rob Zombie was my dad, and I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, the only reason I asked, what I'd like to know is who influenced who. I mean, obviously you've been doing this quite a long time too. Who came onto the music scene first?
Well, it's interesting. I actually started pursuing being in a band first. Before Powerman, in high school and stuff, I had these little, really like the world's worst punk rock bands with my friends. We could barely play. We would write songs that I think clocked in an average of 30 seconds long, and But I actually was sort of first in saying, hey, I'm interested in doing this. I want to be in a band. And he was in New York, going to art school and sort of, doing other things. And it wasn't until after that he started White Zombie, and that whole thing started to take off. So it's interesting, but I still look at, I look at him as an influence in terms of, it's always nice to have a success story on your side. It was always inspiring instead of, we all have friends or relatives or friends of a friend who have, the nightmare music business story or something. But it was always good to have somebody that had some success. So it made me think, well, if he can do it, then I certainly can too.
So did you guys ever play together?
We've never toured together, but we've done. We will find ourselves on a radio show or something every once in a while, and we've done a couple of shows where he's come on stage and we've done a song together, and I've done the same with him, which is usually pretty fun.
Now, before we were going on the air, you were telling us about a website you were working with about horror movies. Now, there's another family line of entertainment that you're all involved in. Yeah,
well, we grew up just obsessed with all things ridiculous. We were comic book nerds. We loved movies, science fiction, horror movies. Watch way too much TV. That's kind of just what we did. And it's great to have all that useless knowledge somehow pay off later in life. And so, in addition to doing the band, I do this. There's an amazing. It's online and also on demand on certain cable networks, and it's called FearNet.com, and we just feature 24/7 horror movies. You can stream free horror movies whenever you want, and I'm sort of like the face of FearNet. I go out and maybe interview Tobin Bell about Saw 6 or whoever, whatever's going on. They just kind of send me out and do my thing, and it's just a really cool world to be involved with, and you get to meet some childhood heroes. I went to Comic-Con this year in San Diego and sat down with Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill for an hour, and I was just like going nuts because I was like the biggest Star Wars nerd growing up. It's a really cool thing.
You're a big Star Wars nut?
I was, yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm a fan of the original Star Wars stuff. This whole more modern, CGI George Lucas stuff leaves me cold. But the original three, all about.
Fantastic. Now you're out on tour. You're the headliner of this tour. Any big package tours coming around? Maybe next spring or summer? You thinking about, Spider?
We're always on the lookout for that stuff, and we always manage to find ourselves on some cool radio shows or little mini festivals and stuff like that. And those are great because you get to see bands that maybe you toured with in the past. But I don't know yet. We're going to finish out this year with this headlining tour, and then see what makes sense, in 2010.
There you are, another sermon from Rockin' Metal Revival. The RMR is a 3-hour hard rock heavy metal show that can be heard anytime at rmrshow.com.